Hello, IP Statistics. This is Mr. Kim, and in this video, you will go over the 6 questions for the AP Stats Chapter 4 FRQ. I labeled it as FRQ Roman numeral 2. We did one question per group. I know that some of you guys might have done, let's say, question 1, the other one did 2, and so on. However, what I'm going to do for this video is to go through every single one of them to make sure that you guys all have the right answers for these. So for the first one here, a study is to be conducted with 4 diets: South Beach diet, Atkins diet, Weight Watchers, and Jenny Craig. So we have these 3 treatments, I would say. And the experiments recruit 200 volunteers to participate in the study. So the volunteers, I'll just put a little highlight on that. The experiment will take place for 3 months, and at the end of the period, their weight loss will be recorded. Discuss how the sample was chosen. If that was the best sampling method, why? If there are better methods, what would a better method be, and why? Okay, so first of all, we're talking about diets here, and we're talking about 200 volunteers. So the sample was taken by recruiting 200 volunteers. This is not the best sampling method because it can lead to voluntary bias. Now, on the day of the FRAPI or the day of the test, don't just say the vocabulary terms and not explain what that means. So the reason why this will create a voluntary bias is because we're talking about 4 diets. This is not the best sampling method because it can lead to voluntary bias. The people that are interested in losing weight or is interested in these programs are the targeted audience, I would say, or are the people that are sampled. The people that are sampled, which leads to undercoverage of all type of people in general population. So I know I kind of tend to say a little bit more, but what I'm trying to convey is the voluntary bias will lead to people who's only interested in the programs, and that will not necessarily be the best case scenario because they will be more interested in staying active, losing weight. And so if we're only trying to see how their weight loss will be recorded, well, it also depends on how much they weigh in the beginning and how much they have lost. If these are all the people who stay active, they may not have a lot of weight to lose in the first place. They may tend to stay athletic. They may tend to stay in shape. So even though these are great programs to lose weight from, let's say, a 200-pound person to, let's say, 160, if we survey only like people with moderate weights, then it's not going to, and then we only see maybe 10-pound difference. We may say that, you know what, these programs are not that great, but that's the problem of taking volunteers only. So what would be a better method be and why? So we want to see how these 4 diets could be helpful to the general population. So I will take a random sample by not taking volunteers, but having people randomly selected, given a number, and choosing by random number generator, and get the sample size that I need. Okay, so here in this study, you can obviously say that, you know, you would go to a nearby town or wherever this, like say a local place, then you will assign each people, let's say a random, but through using a random number generator, I will assign them from 1 to however number of populations there would be. Then you will pick 200 people out of that group. Okay, so 1 to n, assign each person, a number from a town. So this will give me a vast range of people in different shapes, sizes, and age, so that I will be able to implement these 3 types of programs. And outline an experiment that uses random allocation. I think this would be great. So here to show you guys what I mean by A, assign each person a number from a town, then use random number generator to select 200, and then give 3 treatments afterwards. So outline an experiment that uses random allocation. So let's say, for example, that we have these 200 people in the first place. So here, if I were to just take a look. Okay, so here we have the subjects that are volunteers. So we're using the context that was provided for me, which is 200. And then we're just going to have 200 volunteers, and we have, I believe, 4 diets cases. So we have South Beach, Atkins, Weight Watchers, and Jenny Craig. So then we would draw 4 branches out like this, which has South Beach, Atkins, Weight Watchers, and Jenny Craig. Then what would happen is that you would randomly select 50 to be assigned to each of these treatments, all randomly chosen. And then here you would measure, I believe, the 3 months, and at the end of the period, their weight loss will be recorded. So go through the program, and then that's pretty much the same for all of these. And then at the end, you will measure the weight loss and make comparisons. Okay. So here, obviously in the beginning, there might be, it might be a good idea to do some blocking, but I think they just wanted to use a random allocations in the very beginning to just say 50, 50, 50, 50. We're not really considering the age, the gender, the weight in the first place, but we're just going to give just a general idea as to how this is going to be drawn out. So I think it should be okay. And then assigning 1 through 200 and assigning them each of the numbers to select 50 to 200 to each volunteers. Use random number generator to choose the first 50. They will get treatment South Beach. The next 50 gets Atkins. The next 50 Weight Watchers. And the rest Jenny Craig. Right, so then that will give us a random allocation to these 4 treatments. I think that should be good enough for part B here. And then, what the interesting diet? Generalized response to people. Yes. Okay. So I think that should be okay. For in terms of just getting the answers out of the way. So part C, is there a way that blocking could improve the study? Outline the new experiment using blocking. So the one of the major thing that I see is that for this, you first want to see how much of the weight loss has happened, but that can really be extreme for let's say a heavier person in the beginning could lose 100 pounds, whereas less heavier person could be losing maybe 50 pounds. Does that mean that it's less effective because simply due to the quantity of the weight that's being lost? Well, so that all depends on the beginning weights, right? So is there a way of blocking could improve the study? Absolutely yes. You always must answer these questions with a yes or no in the beginning. Then say outline the new experiment using the blocking. So first explain why you said so yes. Because the weight loss can be different from people who has higher weight in the beginning versus people who have less. It is important to block the subjects based on their initial weight. I mean, there could be so many other explanations to this, but the first of the people that I could think of, like people that are super overweight, people that are just middle, and people are just like, let's say, not heavy, then they will respectively in their own categories, we would measure their weight losses, and then we'll be able to make fair comparisons. Another blocking I could possibly assume might be age. However, I'm not sure how that's going to be because, I mean, you could argue for a point of metabolism and things like that when you grow older. But I think when you're talking about weight loss, this should be the most obvious one. And this is what the answer actually wants you to say. So the way that you guys can design this is that, so you have 200. I think you can have, let's say, people that are really heavy overweight, so 200 pounds or more, plus, let's say, and then people who are 200 pounds or less, right? I think the answer key also said that the people who are like, let's say, for example, super overweight, and then just above average weight, so they have three categories. But in all honesty, as long as you show that the blocking is in the beginning, like we have certain numbers to show that, hey, people who are super heavy, people who are not so heavy, we are actually considering those and then giving them their own categories to work with. So people who are heavy, I'm just going to give them a random number, let's say 200 poundish or so. Then you give 4 separate types of treatments. We're going to randomly assign this time 25 in each, because we're safely assuming that 100 and 100, we're going to split them evenly, the people who are heavily overweight and people that are not so heavily overweight. So these 4 people will be given the 4 treatments, the 4 diets, which is Atkins, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, and I believe the last one was South Beach. And the same thing will pretty much happen here. You have 25, 25, 25, 25, and copy and paste all that. So this would be how I would do it. But not just draw the map, but also say that how are you going to do this? So we block based on the weight, the initial weight of the subject. Then we randomize from 1 to 100, assign first 25 to South Beach, next 25 to Atkins, next 25 to Weight Watchers, and the rest to Jenny Craig. Repeat the process for the non-heavy weights, less than 200 pounds. So that explains what this map is about. Yes, this is very tedious, annoying to say this over and over again. I'm going to assign 25, but you need to provide the details as to how this is going to roll. Otherwise, just drawing the map out is not going to be sufficient for them. So yes, because the weight loss can be different from people who has higher weight, it has to be blocked based on what their initial weight is. Part D, is there a need to include a control group in the study? So a control group is the baseline in which you want to compare it to when there's absolutely no condition or no treatment is applied. So in this case, it's a diet course. I think there was also a diet course. Yeah, there's different types of diet that they're trying to implement. Usually what happens when you do these diet programs is that you're 100% you're going to end up losing some sort of weight, maybe stay stagnant or whatever. I don't think you're going to be able to gain weight from these diet programs. So to simply answer this question, we're going to say no. We do not need a control group, because we do not need a control group because it is understood that taking these diets will lead to some degree of weight loss. So there is no need to compare it to the control group, because taking the diets will lead to weight loss, and we are only interested in seeing which type of weight loss program is better or is the best. Or we could say which type of weight loss program yields the highest, because we want to make sure that it's going to be more consistent with what they said in the context here. Their weight loss will be recorded. So we want to measure which type of weight loss program yields the highest weight loss in terms of quantity, in terms of pounds, like how much they lose. So yes, I mean, there's a lot of things you guys can write down for this one, but the answer is definitely a no. You don't want to base it off of something to compare it to, like, let's say having no diet programs implemented, because we know for a fact that that group is going to show no weight change. Like, we know the diets is going to cause some weight loss. Therefore, it's better to just compare which type of weight loss program is going to yield better, better weight loss here and there. We don't have to compare it to something where we know for a fact that it's going to yield no plausible results. By having no treatment applied, we know that that person's going to stay in their weight or gain weight. We're more interested in seeing which weight programs is the best. We know the weight program is going to lose weight. That's the end of line. And so having no treatment is not necessary here. That's the main point that I want you guys to get across. Okay, so that was just number one, but it was very elaborate. And so let's move on to number two. And medical study. So a medical study of heart surgery investigates the effect of a drug called beta blocker on the pulse rate of a patient during surgery. The pulse rate will be measured at a specific point during the operation. The investigators would use 20 patients facing heart surgery as subjects. You have a list of these patients, numbered 1 to 20, and in alphabetical order. Describe the design of a completely randomized experiment to test the effect of beta blockers on pulse rate. Okay, so completely randomized experiment means simply we want to randomize the samples that's given to us. We have 20 patients in total. And so write a few sentences about how you would implement your design. So we have 20. Let's try to draw the diagram first so we can get the idea of what's going on. We will randomize based on the numbers that were given. So we're going to assign 10 like this. Obviously, we're going to do it randomly. And the first 10, I believe we can give them the drug called the beta blocker. And then you have a list of patients. Okay, so effective beta blockers, write a few sentences, and then the other one will not get beta blocker. And I think it's more important also, you can also think of it as a placebo. Give them a placebo or things like that. Actually, because we're talking about drugs here, I'm just gonna say it's gonna be a placebo. So randomly we choose 10, they're gonna get the beta blocker, the other 10 gets a placebo, and then we measure their pulse rate during surgery, and then measure pulse rate during surgery. And then, it investigates the effect of a drug called beta blocker on pulse rate during surgery. And the pulse rate we measured at a specific point. Okay, actually, giving a placebo, because we didn't actually consider the psychological effect in this context here, I'm just going to say no beta blocker instead. I think that's much better, because we want to see for a fact that giving them a beta blocker, and I don't think this context really calls for a psychological effect here. So I'm just going to say no beta blocker for this one. And then we measure and compare. And then write a few sentences about how you would implement your design. First, assign each patient numbers from 1 to, I think it's 20. Then use the random number generator. To select 10 numbers to be assigned beta blockers, and the rest will not get beta blockers. Then measure their pulse rates of patients, and compare. So it's always important for you to draw out the map, because I like to have the visuals, and just kind of helps me to sort out my thoughts. And then you always must reinstate as to what you have done to design it. So first you start with 20, so we always assign. The first sentence should say assigning each numbers from 1 through n. Then use the random number generator. That must be part of it, because they ask you to create a completely randomized design. And then to be assigned to beta blockers for the first 10, and the rest will not get beta blockers. Then measure the pulse rate. So 3 sentences in total. First, assigning. Number 2, use random number generator. 3, compare. Those 3 components must be part of your design when you say these things. Part B, use the section from the random digits to carry out the randomization. So we are talking about numbers from 1 through 20. Obviously, we end on the 20-digit number. So we are going to keep on selecting 2-digit numbers from this list. And we are going to see what numbers we can come up with. So we start from the top. It seems like the first 2 digits I see is 11. So I'm going to write that down. Next one I see is 16. The next one I see is 43, but 43 is not part of 1 through 20, so I have to exclude that. 63 is way too big. The next one I see is 18, 75, 06 means it's a 6. The next one I see is 13, 76, 74, they're no good. 26 is no good. 32 is no good, and then that's 7. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 thus far. 51 is no good. 0, 0, obviously it's not good. 10 is the next one. 43, way too big. Next one is 12. And then we have, so 12 is here, and then we have 0, 4. How much would that give me? So that's 9 in total, and then that's 80. Oh, that's 18, which I already have at the moment, so I can't really use that. 19, I do not have, so there we go. So I use the random digits here, and it seems like 11, 16, 18, 6, 13, 7, 10, 12, 4, and 19. These will be assigned beta blockers. And the rest here, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 9, 13, and then 14, 15, 16, 17, and then 20. These will be assigned no beta blockers. And then I think that's all you really have to do. Require by design, report the results. So once you keep on circling the 2 digits, these are the numbers you come up with, and I think that's pretty much what it comes down to for these questions here. Okay, so moving on to number 3, we have the Brigham Young University Statistics Department is performing randomized comparative experiments to compare teaching methods. Response variables include students' final exam scores and the measure of their attitude towards statistics. One study compares 2 levels of technology for large lectures. We have a standard and multimedia. So I believe that these 2 will be the treatments. The individuals in the study are the 8 lecturers in a basic statistics course. There are 4 instructors, each of whom teaches 2 lectures. Because the lecturers differ, their lectures form 4 blocks. Suppose the lecturers and lecturers are as follows. So we have Hilton, Christensen, Hatfield, and we have Tully. Why is a block design a better choice than a completely randomized design for this study? Well, because what we're trying to do is the response variable includes students' final exam scores and a measure of their attitude towards statistics, whereas the explanatory variable to this, we're trying to see is the technology used in lectures, whether it's going to be the overhead projectors or the multimedia. So we're trying to see technology versus the final exam score and their attitude. Okay, so that's the only thing I'm interested in comparing the two. Now, when you involve lecturers into the study, now you have a different sort of confounding variable coming into play because it depends also how these lecturers use the technology. So why is a block design a better choice than a completely randomized design? Because the professors and their pedagogy means how they teach things. Pedagogy could impact the students' attitude for statistics and the final exam score. The final exam score could be dependent upon the professor's linguistics, the difficulty of the lectures slash exams, and then you can probably put like etc. like for more informations, right? I mean, it could be impacted by these two other components. This provides confounding variable in which we need to account for. That's what I would say. So simply what you want to get your point across is that the professors have an impact on how the students are going to perform on the exams and how they're going to feel about statistics. Part B, outline a block design and do randomization that your design requires. Use the digits table below. So it seems to me that we're trying to get Hilton's class, which is 1 or 6. So let's try to design this first of all. So we have 8 in total, the lectures, and then we're trying to give 2 treatments for each of them. And so for Hilton, let's say, we have 2 classes, period. Well, I'm just going to call it lecture 1 and lecture 6 instead of saying period. So lecture 1 and lecture 6. We have the second one, which is Christensen. Christensen is 2 and 8. So Christensen, lecture 2 and lecture 8. The Hatfield is 3 and 4. Lecture 3, lecture 4. And Tolly is going to be lecture 7. And what's that other one? Lecture 5. Okay. So sorry, I'm like running out of space there, but that's my design. Looks to me that all the numbers that I need to really generate is one single digit number. Okay. So I'm going to be using just a single digit number in comparison to my number 2, which I use 2-digit numbers. So I'm going to start from here, the top row, obviously. So I go by the list, right? So the first number I see is a 4. So what I can do is the number I come across will be assigned to the first treatment, which I believe is the standard treatment, which simply just overhead projector and chalk. So the fourth period or the fourth lecture, this one, Hatfield's fourth lecture, I'm going to randomly assign it as the standard. Whereas that means by default, lecture 3 will be get assigned to the multimedia. So multimedia treatment will be lecture 3. Now, what we're going to do is, because Hatfield's class, we're basing it off of the lecture 3 and lecture 4, the course material is the same, the way that he teaches is the same, the way that he speaks, the exams will be the same, but the only difference now will be multimedia way that he teaches. He's using a lot of PowerPoint slides, he's using a lot of these technology, versus standard, which is just chalk and overhead projectors. Then after that, they will measure their scores. So measure scores, attitude. So here, that will be just for Hatfield. The next number I see is a 9. Unfortunately, I can't use that. 9 is not part of your lectures. The next number I see is a 5. So 5 I will assign, which is here, standard. That will make default the lecture 7 to be multimedia. And then the next one number I see is a 6. 6 is over here for Hilton. So this will get the treatment for standard, and lecture 1 by default will be multimedia. And then the last one, 3 is obviously already taken by the default from Hatfield. 1 is taken. 2 is not taken. So 2 will be given to us as standard. And then the multimedia will be here. I mean, you guys can do this in some other different ways as long as you have randomized it, in which all of these are randomly assigned to one or the other, because by default, the other one has to be given the other treatment. Like Pilton should not be given 2 of the same treatments, right? Multimedia and multimedia. So you have to be able to sort that out and say it clearly as to what you're doing. The number I came across will be assigned to the standard treatment, which will make the other lecture for that lecturer to have the other treatment, to have the multimedia treatment. Okay, so give a couple of sentences as to how you design this, and I believe that we have created it, and then you're going to measure scores, and then we're just going to compare at the very end. Okay, so that's number 3. Let's go on to number 4 here. As you age, can walking briskly for 30 to 60 minutes a day can help keep the pounds away. John Jakisek, okay, director of the University of Pittsburgh Physical Activity. We have 209 adults, average age of 45, which about 15 to 29 pounds overweight. So we're assuming all of those things are about similar. And the first group was given up to 30 minutes of moderate activity daily. Second group was about 30 minutes, 5 days a week, which is a little bit less, and received a weekly class on how and why exercise is important. Was told to exercise 300 or more minutes a week, roughly 45 to 60 minutes a day. So it seems like the third group received the most exercise. The first group was given a moderate, and then the second group was given the least amount of exercise to be given. They also attended behavior classes as well. For the third group, all participants were advised to eat a healthy diet, but told not to restrict their calories. About 75% chose to walk for exercise. I'll outline the study that the researchers carried out. So we have 209 adults to begin with. So this number, it can't really be divided up into 3 exactly, but then since they told me to outline it, which means I'm just going to draw it out as to how this is going to look like. The first one was the 30 minutes moderate activity. The second group was, I believe it was the 300 or more. Oh, I'm sorry, no. Physically active for 150 minutes a week, or roughly 30 minutes for 5 days a week. 300 plus per week. And then that means roughly 45 to 60 minutes per day. And then it was told, okay, so about roughly 45 to, and they all also attended behavior class. All participants were advised to eat healthy and but told not to restrict their calories. 75% chose to walk for the exercise here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is the 209 adults, you guys can randomly assign them to these 3 groups. So randomly assign, and roughly I would say like dividing this by 3 will not give me the exact numbers, but then it seems like 209 divided by 3, that would give me about 69-ish. So that would give me 69 here. Then that would leave me with about 70, I believe. Yeah, so that would be 138. Oh, 7. Am I missing some number here? It says 71. That should be good. Yeah. Okay, so 71. Of the people will be given the last group. So about roughly the same, and then you will just all randomly assign that. Okay, and so that, and then you will just measure and compare their weight loss afterwards. Yeah, keep the pounds away, the weight loss. Comment on any weaknesses of the study that you see. Okay, so again, we have the similar age group. We have the about 15 to 29 pounds overweight. Now, I guess this is also the biggest problem. It's very similar to the one that we did for number 1. It's just that we didn't block it. We did not block it based on their initial weight. the weight loss can be due to how much they weighed in the first place. More weight loss for heavier person than for not so heavy person. Okay, so we did not block it based on what they initially started with of their weight. So I think that's the biggest issue. So also it is better to, I think what they said was to find out the colleagues who rate physical management, which recommended all participants were advised, and then I think they didn't really say how they're going to measure it, but here I think we have a lot of other problems. I think the biggest thing I could probably see is that we did not block it based on the initial weight. And so um if it is better to and I think the most important thing is also this sentence right here. Oh, not the very last one. About 75% chose to walk for exercise. Since it's the subjects, better to have the people conducting the experiment give the treatment than for the subjects to choose what type of physical activity they favor because it could lead to um, misleading results. So what do I mean by this last sentence is that 75% of those chose to walk for exercise. This means that they took the bare minimum like requirement of physical activity. If you give the people who's participating in the study to choose what type of treatments, they're going to choose something that is much more favorable to them and not necessarily for the good of proving how effective these three activities are. So when they said do a physical activity and you give the subjects the freedom to exercise their right to choose whatever they want to do, it's like they could cheat the system and say, yeah, I just walked, but they could walk in a very slower pace. So that's why it's best to give them some sort of a strict guidelines. It's like, okay, you guys must be able to do 30 push-ups. Like, give them some strict guidelines as to what the subjects need to do so that you can accurately measure how their weight loss happened when they are all given the same amount of effort to carry out those treatments. So walking, I mean, walking is so general. Like if you walk, like speed walking, or are you talking about just walking or like very in a slow pace at their own manner? And 75% is way too overwhelming, which means a lot of the people here do not like to physically exercise and they just chose what's easiest for them, which means you're not going to see a very good data and results. So that's why I said misleading results due to that. And I think that should pretty much cover it for part B. Jakisik's group reported that at the end of 18 months, 40% participant gained weight. Those most likely to gain were people who did not exercise regularly. 60% lost weight, average of 7 pounds. These were people in any of the three groups who did about 40 minutes of activity 7 days a week. Okay, so we see that clearly that this result shows that exercising regularly could indicate losing weight. Jakishik said this is a weight difference of 14 pounds between people who exercise and those who didn't. Can walking about 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week, explain the weight loss? Or there are lurking variables that might also. Okay, so first of all, we're talking about an average weight of 7 pounds. They measured, so to answer the question first, can walking about 40 minutes explain the weight loss? First of all, let's say no, because there's so many other confounding variables that we talked about, I believe, in part B. Because the weight loss, as mentioned above, could be due to their initial weight. These 7 pounds lost could be from, let's say, 100 and I'm sorry, 220 pounds to about, let's say, 200 pounds. That's a loss of 20. Whereas the other group of people may have even like 150 and then they just stayed stagnant. So you have all of these data, right? Then you average them out and it gives you 7 pounds. Does that mean that you will lose 7 pounds? Well, no, it means that you lose 7 pounds when you average them out, and it really depends on your initial weight. The heavier you are, the more likely chance that you will lose some proportion amount of weight, and that's much more in quantity. And it could be due to their initial weight. It is better to use weight loss percentage because that's all relative to their initial weight. To use weight loss percentage and to accurately measure the effectiveness of physical activity. Lurking variables that might also help the weight loss. Okay, so another thing that we just also talked about was the physical activities. Also, the physical activities mentioned 75% chose walking, which means 25% chose something else. This means that some participants engaged in heavier or, let's say, lighter exercise compared to the 75% who chose walking. The type of activity could be a confounding variable as well. Okay, my arm starts to get tired, but you guys get the idea. So there's so many things that impacts the weight loss. Mainly, I just mentioned two. It's the type of activities and the initial weight that they start to begin with, because that could explain as to why the weight loss has happened to those to that extent. Okay, so that should explain part A, B, and C. All right, so now let's move on to question number 5. As dogs age, diminished joint and hip health may lead to joint pain and thus reduce dog's activity level. Such a reduction in activity can lead to other health concerns such as weight gain and lethargy due to lack of exercise. A study is to be conducted to see which of two dietary supplements, glucosamine or chondroitin, is more effective. So we're talking about two of these dietary supplements. Of the canine osteoarthritis, researchers will randomly select a total of 300 dogs from a large veterinary practices around the country. All of the dogs are more than 6 years old and their owners have given consent. Changes in joint and hip health will be evaluated after 6 months. What will be the advantage of adding a control group in the design of this study? So, what we want to do is first let's identify what we're trying to do in terms of explanatory and response. The response is reducing a dog's joint pain. And which also causes reduced the dog's activity level. Now, is that going to be caused by the two dietary pills? So does this explain that it could diminish the dog's joint pain? Well, at the beginning, you must ask yourself, well, is it only solely due to dietary pills? Would that be effective? So what would be an advantage of adding a control group? Well, it allows us to compare to a group that receives no dietary pills to prove that dietary pills is indeed effective in diminishing dogs' joint pain. So what do I mean by this is, this is not the part you want to write down, but I'm just going to give you an example, okay? So you give the glucosamine, and then chondroitin, and then we measure, like, let's say 100 dogs giving glucosamine, 100 dogs chondroitin, and then we see that we have about maybe about +5 that actually show the diminished joint pain, and then we see only like +2, something like that. And then for no treatment for 100, we see, like, obviously we don't see any changes here. Now, are these significant enough for us to say that these two dietary pills is going to be effective? That's the reason. These two numbers are going to be so uneventful, to the point where, you know what, maybe it's not about the dietary pills, maybe it's about um, something else that we may haven't considered before. What type of other treatments can we consider? So this gives us a baseline as to see and compare that these two treatments is indeed the cause. Like, it's going to cause something in which we can compare it to. Like, what if this number was +37, +32, and then we compare it to a group that receives nothing, and then we see that, oh, clearly dietary pills is the way to go. Like, it gives us a baseline to work with. And that is pretty much what you want to write down for number one. Researchers comparison group to evaluate the effectiveness of the treatments. So the effective and diminishing joint. I think I hit all the right marks here. Even if I took a look at the answer key, yeah, I think I said pretty much what I needed to say for part A. Part B, assuming a control group is added to the other group 2 studies, explain how you would assign 300 dogs to these three groups for completely randomized design. Okay, so since I'm asked to explain, first of all, let me just give you guys the outline. 300, we're going to obviously assign 100 each. Of course, we're going to do it randomly. And then these three will be receiving the three treatments, which is glucosamine, chondroitin, and then the control. So then that would mean that these three treatments will be given. Then we measure their, after 6 months, we measure the changes in joint and hip health. So we do the same thing for both of these, and then we basically compare the results. So this is the outline, and obviously we need to say the sentences. First, assign each dog. Remember, the first sentence should always start with assigning. Assign each dog a number from 1 through 300. Then use the random number generator to assign the first 100 to glucosamine, the second 100 to chondroitin, and the rest put them in the control group. No treatment. Then wait 6 months, measure their joint and hip health, then compare the results. Remember, not only are you supposed to, I mean, outlines is just there to help you out. I always like to have the outline so I know, like, I need to hit all these points. Make sure you have those magical 3 sentences, assigning them, use the random number generator, and then compare the results. Those 3 things always must happen in an experiment, well-designed experimental design. Rather than using a completely randomized design, one group of researchers proposes to block on clinics, and another group of researchers proposes blocking on breed of dog. How would you decide which one of these two variables uses a blocking variable? So C, you would first say the correct answer here, which is we would use blocking on breed of the dog. Because the joint and hip health can vary among the type of dogs, type of breed, it is important to compare for a specific breed, for that specific breed, for that specific category, and then is because of joint and hip health, it can vary among the type of the breed. It is important to compare for a specific type of breed rather than basing it off of the clinics. Clinics can have many different type of breed in one location, which does not yield homogeneous group of dogs to block them by. Guys, when you're blocking in anything, they need to it's like stratifying, right? They need to have a similar characteristics. Clinics could be based off of like locations, like they're all in that one specific location. However, if we're trying to measure the joint and hip pain of dogs, it will make much more sense to base it off of the breed of the dog. Why? Because it depends on the breed of the dog, their size, the lifespan, the longer bones in their bodies, and how active they are. Some dogs are much more lethargic, some dogs are more active. It all depends on the breed of the dogs. And so we are trying to keep everything, homogeneous in terms of those regards by basing the blocks off of the breed. If you base it off of clinics can have multitudes of breeds of dogs, which means just because we can't block them based on clinics because there's no similar characteristics to go off by other than the locations. Well, the location doesn't really impact the hip and joint health of these dogs. It's about the breed. So I guess the word that the answer key like to say is the word homogeneous as well. Just think about and the reason why I said that word and to emphasize on it is so that you guys understand when you're blocking, you always must consider the similar characteristics of these blocks, and that must be somewhat relative to the response variable. I mean, the response is the joint and hip health. Is that really going to be relative to the locations of these clinics? It's not. It's all about the breeds, and so you explained why. Somewhere along these lines, I think it should do. All right, so we're finally down to our last question, which is number 6. The United States Department of Energy is conducting an experiment to compare the heat gain in houses using the 2 different types of windows, A and B. 6 windows of each type are available for the experiment. The department has constructed a house with 12 windows as shown on the floor plan below. So in the interior of the house, each window is surrounded by a window to capture and measure the amount of heat coming through that window and isolate the heat gain for each window. Randomized block experiment once again. So we're blocking it off of the types in which they're actually asking you, justifying your choice of blocks. And we need to have a total of, I believe, 6 A and B of the windows. How would you group the windows into blocks? Clearly indicate your blocks using the window box numbers. So since each window will be given a group, given a type A or B, and there's 12 windows in total, if you divide 12 by 2, you're going to get a 6. So let's see how we can design the blocks for this. So it depends on the side of the walls where the side of the walls could impact as to how much heat is gained. Maybe the heat is coming from one source and you want to only look at that source, one that's closest to the heat source, one that's farthest away. And so what we want to do is we want to block it based off of the closeness, whether it's going to be these two, the 2 windows on the north side. So I would base it off of, so block 1 would be the north. So there will be 2, which is Windows box number 1, Windows box number 12, and then obviously there's another block down here in the south, Windows box number 6, Windows box number 7. There's another block here, which is now on the side, on this side, on the west side. Now what I can do is I can go off it by like size like this, the one that's closest to. So Windows 11, Windows 10, the other group would be, oh boy, I think I should have made it a little bit differently, but okay, so let's see if I can try to put everything here. So sorry guys, but the part A is, I'm just going to write it here. Another block would be from window 8 to window 9. Another block would be windows 2 and 3 on the east side. And then another block would be obviously window 4 and window 5. So justify the choice of blocks. So let's think about this. The context was 6 type of windows. The department has constructed a house with 12 windows. Heat gain in houses using 2 different types of windows and capture the amount of heat coming through that window. The sides of the wall in this room could have different measure of heat coming through depending on where the heat source is. Therefore, it is important to block these windows based on the sides of the room, north, east, south, west, and the 4 windows on east and west will be paired with the closest window. I think that should pretty much cover it. Will be paired with the closest window. The proximity of the windows, so basically how close are the windows together from one side. The proximity of the windows on one side of the room is how I blocked the windows by. Okay, so I have 6 blocks. 2 of each of these windows will be assigned to each block, and then these will be given like type A, type B, type A, type B by flipping a coin. Then this could reach B A, B, A, B, B, A. It could be just randomly assigned like that by flipping a coin. And then so how would you group the windows into blocks? For design party, discuss how you will assign window type and window type B. I think I just said it. Flip a coin. Flip a coin. Then if the heads come up, assign the first window or assign the lower numbered window type A. If the tails come up, assign the higher number window, because each window blocks has one higher, one lower. Higher number window type B. Something like that should do it. So I randomize it based upon the result of the flipping of coin. It's a 50-50 chance, and I randomize it, and then so the orders could be like A B A B B A A B A B B A, or B A A B B A A B A B. Something like it could happen like that. So flipping a coin when you're deciding between 2 things is the most common way to do it. So whenever you run across those type of questions, just go right ahead and just write it like that. And always explain the results. Don't just say flip a coin and just stop there. Describe as to how you would assign. Okay, so you got heads. Once you flip a coin, how would you be able to assign that? Well, the lower number get heads, and then the higher number gets tails, or something like that. Okay, so that was quite elaborate. Like I said, chapter 4, it's all about just writing down how to design these things, and it's tough sometimes. So that literally took about an hour and a half just to finish this all through. So I hope this video helps, and good luck to you guys on the Frappy and the test next Monday.